You remember the coffee? It was a Tuesday morning. The steam made little ghosts in the cool air. You were watching the news on a screen. The anchors were smiling their plastic smiles. Nothing felt important. Nothing felt real. Then everything stopped. It was not a power outage. The lights stayed on. The screen in your hand stayed bright. But the anchor's smile was frozen. A drop of coffee hung in the air. It was halfway from your cup to the floor. Outside your window, a bird was frozen mid-flap. Its wings were perfect statues against the blue sky. This was not a pause. This was a break. The silence was the first thing you truly noticed. It was a heavy, deep silence. It was not the absence of sound. It was the death of sound. You tried to speak, but the word caught in your throat. The air itself refused to move. You were a statue in a world of statues, a ghost in a photograph. Panic tried to find you. It was a cold snake coiling in your gut. But it too seemed frozen, slowed to a crawl. You could feel your own heart. It was still beating. Thump, pause, thump. A lonely drum in a silent universe. You were the only thing in the world that still moved. And you had no idea why. Around you, the world was a broken mirror. Each shard reflected a different moment. A car on the street outside flickered. It was there, then gone, then there again. The sound of its horn echoed out of sync. It was a ghost sound from a second ago, or maybe a second from now. People on the sidewalk were caught in loops. A woman laughed the same laugh over and over. A man checking his watch raised his arm again and again. They were living cartoons stuck on a single frame. Their lives were reduced to a single, repeating tick. It was a city of broken clocks. You saw the first one in the reflection of a skyscraper. It was not human. It was long and thin, like a crack in the glass. It moved with a jittering, unnatural grace. It seemed to swim through the frozen world. It paid no attention to the trapped people. They were just scenery to it. Then you saw another. It was pulling at the edges of a man. The man was stuck trying to hail a cab. The creature was not eating his flesh. It was eating the moment he was in. The colors around him faded. The sounds of his life went silent. He flickered once, then vanished. The world had forgotten him. You learned their name from the whispers. The whispers came from the cracks in time. They slithered into your mind. They did not speak a language you knew. They spoke in feelings, in pure concepts. They called themselves the Vex. That was the closest your mind could get to their real name. They were not soldiers. They were not conquerors. They came to this reality like cosmic locusts. They did not want your planet. They did not want your resources. They wanted your time. Your history was a feast. Every second of human life was a delicacy. You saw them work up close. A young couple sat on a park bench. They were frozen in a perfect, happy moment. A Vex, a thing of shifting glass and shadow, drifted toward them. It reached out a long, sharp limb. It did not touch the couple. It touched the air around them. The moment shattered like ice. The couple's laughter turned into a silent scream. Their colors washed out, turning to gray. Then they became transparent, ghosts of what they were. The Vex seemed to drink the light and sound. Then the couple was gone. The bench was empty. It was like they had never been born. The world was breaking. For most people, their minds broke with it. You saw them in the streets. They were screaming at the looping cars. They were clawing at their own faces. The paradoxes were too much for them to handle. Reality had become a weapon against itself. Their sanity frayed and then snapped. A mind can only see a bird fly backwards so many times. It can only hear a silent scream for so long. They were lost in the temporal chaos. They became another kind of ghost. Their bodies were there, but their minds were gone. But you were different. The chaos did not break you. It focused you. When you looked at a looping person, you saw the seams. You could see the start and the end of the loop. When you saw a Vex, you did not feel mind-shattering dread. You felt a cold, sharp anger. You were an anchor. While the world was a ship tossed in a hurricane, you were the heavy iron holding it fast. Your mind was a fortress. The temporal distortions washed over you, but they could not get inside. You saw the broken world clearly, and you knew it was a battlefield. This was not the end. It was the beginning of a war. Someone found you. They wore simple gray uniforms. Their faces were calm and serious. They moved through the frozen moments like you did. They were not surprised to see you standing there, lucid and aware. They told you that you were a chrono anchor, a rare human anomaly. They took you to a place hidden from the Vex. It was a bunker deep underground. Time inside was stable, shielded. They called it the Bastion. It was the last sanctuary for a sane humanity. Here, they were not just surviving. They were learning to fight back. They told you what they knew. The event was not an accident. It was an invasion. The Vex had fractured our timeline on purpose. They were harvesting our past to fuel their future. Humanity was not being conquered. It was being erased. Your training began at once. There was no time to waste. Your first lesson was simple. Walk. You stood at the edge of the Bastion's time field. Beyond it, a hallway was frozen in time. A soldier had dropped a tray of food. Green peas hung in the air like tiny planets. Your job was to walk to the other end. You stepped out of the stable time. The change was instant. The air grew thick like honey. Your own movements felt slow, exaggerated. Every step was a struggle against a tide of frozen moments. You were swimming through eternity. It was like walking at the bottom of a very deep ocean. You learned to breathe in the moments between moments. You learned to see the currents in the flow of time. There were fast channels and slow eddies. The Vex used them like highways. Your trainers taught you to feel them, to anticipate them. Your senses were being remade. The training was brutal. Mistakes were costly. A wrong step could trap you in a micro-loop. You would live the same 3 seconds for what felt like a year. A moment of lost focus could get you swept away into a temporal riptide. Some trainees never came back. They were lost in the echoes. But you learned. You became stronger. You could move through a frozen cityscape for hours. You could navigate the treacherous currents of a slow zone. You were no longer just an anchor. You were becoming a weapon, a human mind, forged into a tool of war. Your first mission was a test. A small Vex harvesting operation was detected. It was in a suburban neighborhood. The entire area was in a slow zone. Time there moved at 1,000th of normal speed. Your team's job was simple. Get in, plant a charge, and get out. Easy enough for a stroll through hell. You stepped into the slow zone with your team. 3 others, all anchors like you. The world slowed to a crawl. The sound of a distant lawnmower was a low, guttural drone. The light from the sun was thick and syrupy. A child's ball hung in the air. It was a few feet from a window. You moved through the silent streets. It was a neighborhood of ghosts. People were frozen in their driveways. A man washing his car held a sponge that dripped a single, unmoving drop of water. You saw the Vex. There were 5 of them. They moved like shimmering heat waves over the asphalt. They were clustered around a family. A mother and father were having a picnic on their lawn. Their children were frozen mid-laugh. The Vex were draining the moment, siphoning away the happiness and the life. A cold rage filled you. This was not a harvest. This was a violation. Your team leader gave the signal. You moved in. You were trained to be silent, to be invisible. But a Vex turned. Its featureless head swiveled toward you. It let out a sound. It was not a sound your ears could hear. It was a psychic shriek that scraped against your mind. The fight was a blur of motion. The Vex were fast, even in the slow zone. They lunged with limbs like obsidian shards. Your team moved with practiced grace. You dodged a slash that would have cut you from time itself. The air where it passed sizzled with paradox. You saw your team leader fight one. He used a device that created a small bubble of fast time. The Vex was caught inside. It thrashed in confusion as the world sped up around it. He dispatched it with a burst of concentrated energy. One down. You faced your own. It came at you, a whirlwind of broken glass and wrong angles. You did not have a weapon yet. Your only tool was your mind. You focused on the moment. You grabbed the Vex's own nature and twisted it. You found the temporal frequency it existed on, and you pushed. It was like pushing against a mountain. Your head throbbed. Your nose began to bleed. But the Vex staggered back. It shrieked in your mind again. This time it was a sound of pain, of confusion. It had never met a mind that could push back. It was not invincible. It could be hurt. Another team member flanked it. He fired a weapon that did not shoot bullets. It fired a pulse of pure, stable time. The pulse hit the Vex. The creature convulsed. Its form destabilized. It flickered like a bad hologram. Then it shattered into a million pieces of silent light. The other Vex turned to flee. But your team was faster. You cut off their escape routes. You used your minds, your training, to corner them. The last one was dispatched quickly. The fight was over in what felt like an hour. In the real world, less than a second had passed. Your team planted the charge. It was not an explosive. It was a temporal resonator. When it activated, it would reset the local timeline. It would erase the slow zone. It would free the people trapped here. But it would also erase the last few minutes. The Vex attack would have never happened. You retreated to a safe distance. The team leader gave you a nod. A look of respect. You had faced your first Vex. You had not broken. You had fought back. You watched as the resonator activated. A wave of golden light washed over the neighborhood. The drone of the lawnmower snapped back to its normal pitch. The child's ball shattered the window. Time was healed, for now. Back in the bastion, you were brought to the forge. It was a place of impossible science. Engineers in gray suits worked around a glowing artifact. It was a piece of a Vex, a shard recovered from a battle. They had learned to stabilize its impossible properties. Your commander stood before you. He held a weapon. It was a blade, but not made of steel. It seemed to be forged from frozen light. Its edges were impossibly sharp. They did not cut matter. They cut time. It was a shard blade. He told you that humanity was fighting back. They were not just defending. They were creating. They were turning the enemy's own nature against them. These blades were the first step. They could permanently sever a Vex from the timeline. An injury from this blade was an absolute end. He held the blade out to you. "This is yours," he said. His voice was grim. "You have earned it. Use it to defend the past. Use it to secure the future." You took the handle. It was cold. Not a physical cold. It was the cold of a vacuum. The cold of a moment that has ceased to exist. Holding it, you felt a new kind of power. It was not just the power to fight. It was the power to protect. You looked at the blade's shimmering edge. It reflected your face. You were no longer just a survivor. You were a soldier, a guardian, a warrior in a war for reality itself. Your training intensified. You learned to fight with the shard blade. It was not like swinging a sword. You did not block or parry. You cut at the space between your enemy's movements. You sliced through the probability of their attacks. A duel with a Vex was a dance of causality. You sparred against training drones that mimicked Vex movements. They flickered in and out of existence. They attacked from moments in the past. They dodged into moments in the future. You had to learn to think in 4 dimensions. You had to anticipate not just where they were, but when they were. You mastered the blade. It felt like an extension of your own will. With it, you could cut a looping moment. You could sever a temporal echo. You could carve a path through the frozen chaos of the outside world. You were ready for the real war. You were ready for what came next. The intelligence came from a deep dive team. They had explored a massive temporal distortion, a wound in reality far larger than any you had seen. Inside, they found something new. Not a simple harvesting operation. It was a nexus, a Vex stronghold. And inside it, they made contact with a new mind. It was not like the mindless harvesters. This mind was ancient. It was vast. It was powerful. It called the Vex by their true name. The Elder Ones. The Vex you had been fighting were just the workers, the drones. The Elder Ones were the masters. You learned their goal. It was so much worse than you imagined. They were not just feeding. They were correcting. They viewed our history, our entire timeline, as a mistake. A chaotic, messy equation that needed to be solved. Their solution was to erase it, all of it. From the first spark of life to the last dying star. They were not just eating our past. They were systematically unmaking it. They were harvesting key historical moments. They took the building of the pyramids, the signing of great treaties, the discovery of fire. Each theft weakened the structure of our reality. It made our present more fragile, more easy to break. The Elder Ones were not just destroying humanity. They were devouring the very concept of history. They wanted to leave nothing behind, not even a ghost, not even an echo. Just a perfect, silent, empty void. A timeline without life, without choice, without change. A perfect, final oblivion. This was the true enemy. This was the true war. Your next mission was the most dangerous yet. An entire city had fallen into a Vex trap. It was not a slow zone. It was a loop. The city of Prague was trapped. It was reliving the same 90 minutes of a terrible flood. The waters rose. The dams broke. The city drowned. Then time would reset. And it would happen all over again. The Elder Ones were using the city as a power source. The sheer emotional energy of the catastrophe was a feast for them. The repeating sorrow of millions of people was being harvested. It was a power plant fueled by despair. Your job was to get inside, find the looping engine, and destroy it. You led a team of 12 anchors. You dove into the loop at its beginning. The sky was gray. The rain had just begun to fall. The people of the city were unaware. They walked the streets. They drank their coffee. They lived their last normal moments for the 1,000th time. Knowing what was coming was a heavy weight. You could not save them, not directly. Interfering with the people would only anchor you to their tragic loop. You had to move like ghosts, unseen, unheard. You had to navigate the city as the disaster unfolded around you. You had to watch them die, over and over again. The first loop was reconnaissance. You mapped the city's temporal currents. You tracked the Vex movements. They drifted through the rising waters like sharks. They fed on the panic and the fear. You saw the looping engine. It was at the heart of the old city. It was a massive, crystalline structure pulsing with stolen time. The second loop, you made your plan. You would use the flood itself as cover. The rising water would mask your temporal signature. You would approach the engine from the flooded subway tunnels. It was a risky plan. One mistake, and you would drown with the rest of the city. Then you would be forced to drown again. The third loop, you went in. The water rose around you. The screams of the city were your soundtrack. You moved through the dark tunnels. The water was cold. The pressure was immense. You saw the ghosts of people who had drowned here on the first day. Their faces were frozen in terror. You reached the central station. The engine was there. It was a monstrous, beautiful thing, a cathedral of paradox. It pulsed with a sickening rhythm, the heart of the city's repeating sorrows. It was guarded by elite Vex, not the simple drones. These were larger, faster, and smarter. The fight began. Shard blades met obsidian limbs. Pulses of stable time met waves of chaos. The station was a whirlwind of temporal warfare. You fought through the rising water. You cut down Vex guards as the lights flickered and died. You were a creature of vengeance in a city of ghosts. You pushed toward the engine. Your team fought with a grim determination. They knew what was at stake. They knew the price of failure. You saw one of your own fall. A Vex caught him in a temporal pincer. He did not die. He was simply unwritten. He vanished from the moment. You felt the timeline shift as it forgot him. You were the first to reach the engine. You placed the resonator charge at its base. The Vex swarmed you. You fought with the fury of a cornered animal. Your shard blade was a blur of light. You cut down one, then another. But there were too many. A Vex warrior disarmed you. Your blade spun away into the dark water. It cornered you against the engine. Its sharp limb rose for the final blow. You closed your eyes, but the end did not come. The Vex warrior froze. Then it shuddered and collapsed. Behind it stood another of your team. She held her smoking pulse rifle. She gave you a grim smile. You armed the charge. The countdown began. 60 seconds in real time, an eternity in the loop. Your team formed a perimeter around you. They held back the tide of Vex. The water was up to your chests. The screams of the dying city echoed around you. 40 seconds. The Elder Ones themselves took notice. A vast, cold intelligence pressed down on you. It was a mind the size of a galaxy. It tried to break you. It showed you visions of your own death. It showed you a future where humanity never existed. It screamed into the core of your being. 20 seconds. But you were an anchor. You held fast. Your mind was a rock against the psychic storm. You focused on one thing, the faces of the people in this city. The laughter that had been stolen, the lives that had been turned into fuel. Your anger was a shield. 10 seconds. Your team began to fall back. The Vex were overwhelming them. 5, 4, 3. You were the last one at the engine. 2. You dove into the flooded tunnel. 1. A wave of pure, white time erupted from the engine. It did not explode. It unraveled. The loop shattered. The city of Prague was free. Time snapped forward. The flood waters receded in an instant. The sky cleared. The sun came out. For the people of the city, no time had passed at all. They had a headache, a feeling of bad dreams. But they were alive, and they were free. Your team returned to the bastion. You had lost 3 members. Their names were etched onto a memorial wall, a wall of heroes the world would never know. You had won the battle, but the intelligence you gathered painted a grim picture of the war. The looping city was just a power station, and you now knew what it was powering. Deep in the heart of the temporal distortion, the Vex were building a weapon. It was their masterpiece, a machine so vast it defied comprehension, so powerful it could rewrite reality on a fundamental level. They called it the Paradox Engine. It was not a weapon that fired a beam. It did not destroy planets. It destroyed concepts. Its target was singular. The moment that humanity first evolved the ability to choose. The very instant that consciousness and free will were born. The engine was being built to reach back through millions of years and erase that single second. If it succeeded, humanity would not just be extinct. We would be impossible. We would be a paradox that never happened. Our art, our science, our love, our hate, all of it would vanish. The universe would be rewritten without us in it. It would be as if a thinking mind had never once looked up at the stars. The completion of the Paradox Engine meant the end of everything. The end of was, the end of is, and the end of will be. Your victory in Prague had only delayed them. They would build another power source. The engine was still being built, and the clock was ticking toward the end of forever. You had to stop it, but you had no idea how. Then, something impossible happened. An enemy sought you out. It came not with violence, but with a plea. You were on a patrol mission, scouting the edges of the engine's construction site, a vast nebula of broken time and raw chaos. You were alone, moving through the temporal wreckage. A single Vex appeared before you. It was not a warrior. It looked different. Older. Its form was less sharp, more fluid. It did not attack. It projected a feeling into your mind. It was not hostile. It felt afraid, desperate. It showed you images. It showed you the Elder Ones debating. Most were united in their goal, but a few were not. This Vex was one of them, a dissenter. It believed the Paradox Engine was a mistake, an act of supreme arrogance. It told you that to erase a concept as fundamental as choice, as consciousness, was to risk everything. The universe was a complex equation. Removing a key variable could cause the entire thing to collapse. Not just our timeline. Every reality. Even the Elder Ones themselves would be consumed in the resulting universal collapse. This Vex was not your friend. It did not care about humanity. It cared about its own survival. It saw the Elder Ones as fanatics driving their entire race off a cliff. And it had chosen you, the human anomaly, the anchor. It saw you as the only variable that could change the outcome. It revealed a secret, a flaw in the Paradox Engine's design. The engine was powered by harvested sorrow, by stolen history, but it was stabilized by a core of pure, absolute causality, a single, perfect, unchangeable moment. This core was its greatest strength, and its only weakness. The core was shielded from all temporal attacks. Your shard blades could not touch it. Your pulse rifles could not scratch it. It existed outside the rules of the war you were fighting. But the Vex dissenters showed you how to build a key, a weapon that could bypass the shields, a weapon that could strike the core. It would take all of humanity to build it. It was our last and only hope. You returned to the Bastion with this new intelligence. It changed everything. Before, there was only despair. Now, there was a path, a narrow, dangerous path, but a path nonetheless. The plan was presented to the leaders of the last human sanctuaries. All of humanity united with a single purpose. They would build the weapon. They called it the Chrono Spear. It would not be forged from metal or energy. It would be forged from human will. Every surviving scientist, engineer, and thinker devoted their minds to the project. They worked in shielded labs, racing against the end of time. It was the greatest project in human history. It required a new understanding of star science, a new mastery over causality. The core of the spear needed a temporal signature that was both perfectly stable and infinitely complex. It needed an anchor point, a human consciousness. You were the only choice. You would not just wield the spear, you would become a part of it. Your mind, the anchor that could withstand the chaos, would be the guidance system. It was your consciousness that would guide the spear to the heart of the paradox engine. It was a mission you might not return from. But there was no hesitation. You watched them build it, a spire of crystalline logic and woven light. It hummed with a power that made your teeth ache. It was the embodiment of humanity's defiance. It was a single shot to save all of eternity. All of our history, all of our future, was being placed into your hands. The weight was unimaginable. But you were not alone. Every human mind left was with you, pushing with you, believing in you. The final battle was about to begin. You stood on the command deck of the Dauntless. It was the flagship of humanity's tiny, defiant fleet. Outside the viewport was the Maelstrom, a storm of raw time surrounding the Vex fortress. It was a fortress that existed in all moments at once, a cancer on the timeline. The paradox engine was at its heart. The plan was insane. It was beautiful. Humanity would not attack on one front. It would attack on three. Across the whole of time, Team Alpha would dive into the distant past. They would strike the fortress during its construction. Team Omega would go to the far future. They would assault the fortress as it crumbled into dust. Your team was Gamma. You would lead the main assault, a direct strike on the fortress in the present. You would carry the Chrono Spear. Your target was the engine's core, a single perfect strike to save everything that ever was or will be. No pressure at all, a little joke to yourself. It didn't help. The call came. All teams were in position. Across 1,000,000 years of history, humanity held its breath. Your commander looked at you. His face was a mask of grim resolve. "Time is a river," he said, his voice quiet. "Humanity is the stone that will turn its course. Be that stone. Good luck, Guardian." You stepped onto the deployment platform. The Chrono Spear was mounted before you. It was not a weapon you carried. It was a vehicle you piloted with your mind. You placed your hands on the control nodes. You closed your eyes. You connected your consciousness to the heart of the spear. The feeling was total. You were the spear. The spear was you. You could feel the hopes of every last human. They were a current of strength flowing into you. You were no longer just yourself. You were the will of a species that refused to die. You gave the signal. You were ready. The Dauntless fired. Not a torpedo, not a laser. It fired you. The Chrono Spear shot into the Maelstrom. The universe outside dissolved into a blur of color and light. You were traveling through the chaos between seconds. Vex fighters swarmed you. They were living paradoxes, ships of jagged shadow. They fired weapons that erased your past. You felt your memories flicker. A childhood friend's face vanished. The taste of your first coffee faded away. But you were the anchor. You held on. You fired back. The spear unleashed waves of stable time. They washed over the Vex ships, unmaking them. You heard the voices of the other teams in your mind. Team Alpha was fighting in a sea of molten rock. The fortress was just a foundation. They were battling Vex builders from a forgotten age. Team Omega was in a dying red future. They fought ancient, weary Vex among the ruins of their own grand design. You broke through the outer defenses. The fortress loomed. It was a structure of impossible geometry. It hurt your mind to look at it. You flew through canyons of shifting causality. Towers twisted into nothingness. Gates opened into moments of forgotten history. This was the enemy's home. You felt the Elder Ones. Their collective mind was a psychic scream. It hammered at your defenses. It showed you visions of failure. It showed you your team being torn apart. It showed you Earth being unwritten from the pages of time. But the hope of humanity was your shield. You pushed on. You reached the heart of the fortress. The Paradox engine was there. It was a black sun of stolen time. It pulsed with a dark energy that drank the light. At its center, you saw it, the core, a perfect stable point of light, a single flawless diamond of pure causality. It was beautiful, and you had to destroy it. You aimed the spear, you began your final run. This was it, the single shot to save eternity. Vex royal guards appeared. They were massive beings, clad in armor of frozen time. They were the personal guards of the Elder Ones. They moved to intercept you. You would not make it. Then, something new happened. A Vex ship appeared beside you. It was the Dissenter. It and others loyal to it. They opened fire on the Royal Guard. They bought you an opening, a single clear path to the core. The Dissenter's thought touched your mind. Be the variable that saves us all, it said. You pushed the spear to its limit. You were a bolt of pure human will. The Elder Ones focused their full power on you. It was a crushing weight, a psychic supernova. Your mind screamed. Your body felt like it was being torn apart. But you did not stop. You were the stone. You were humanity. You were feet from the core. Its light filled your vision. You braced for the impact. This was the end of the line. You would either save the world or erase it. Then you were through. You were inside. You were in the eye of the storm, a place of perfect, absolute calm. You were no longer in the spear. You were standing in a place of pure, white nothing. Before you stood a single being. It was not Vex. It was not human. It was a column of calm, silver light. An Elder One, the master of the Vex. It did not radiate hate. It radiated a profound sadness. You have come far, little anomaly, it said. Its voice was not sound. It was a thought that bloomed in your soul. You believe you are here to save your history. You are mistaken. You are here to choose it. The being of light waved its hand. The white nothingness changed. You saw two paths stretch out before you. Two possible futures. Two different ways to mend the shattered second you had broken. The first path showed you the world you knew. Earth restored. The clocks working. The people safe. But it was a fragile peace. The being showed you the future. Other races would rise. Other temporal wars would be fought. Humanity would one day fall. Your victory would only be a delay. A temporary reprieve from the inevitable chaos of existence. Then it showed you the second path. On this path, time was not just repaired, it was improved. Humanity would be changed, evolved, no longer bound by the linear flow of moments. We would become something more. Masters of time, guardians of reality. But there was a price. The being showed you the cost. To create this new future, the current version of humanity had to be edited. Millions of people who could not handle the change would be painlessly unwritten. They would never have existed. Their moments, their loves, their sorrows, sacrificed for the greater good, for a stronger, eternal humanity. This was the choice. Restore the world you loved, knowing it was doomed to fail eventually. Or sacrifice a part of that world to create a perfect, eternal future. The Chronos spear was in your hand, no longer a weapon, but a tool of creation. Which reality would you write? The Elder One watched you. There was no judgment in its gaze. All life is a choice, it whispered in your mind. This is simply the last one. What will you choose, Guardian? The beautiful, flawed past? Or the perfect, costly future? The fate of all of was, is, and will be waited for your answer. You looked down the first path. You saw the face of your commander. You saw the people of Prague living their simple, beautiful lives. You saw the coffee cup hanging in the air on that first day. All of it fragile, all of it flawed, all of it real. You looked down the second path. You saw humanity as gods, striding through eternity. Their faces were calm, powerful, and cold. They were magnificent, and they were strangers. To save humanity, you would have to lose what made them human. The struggle, the imperfection, the love born from a fleeting life. You had your answer. You were an anchor. Your job was not to create a perfect world. Your job was to protect the one you had. You turned to the being of light. You raised the spear, and you chose the first path. You chose home. You plunged the spear not into the core, but into the vision of your world. A wave of golden light erupted. It was not an explosion. It was a sunrise. It washed over everything. The white nothingness dissolved. The Vax fortress shuddered and came apart. The maelstrom calmed. Time reset, not to the way it was, but to a new dawn. The cracks were sealed. The loops were broken. The echoes were silenced. The Vex, their purpose shattered, faded away like bad dreams. Their stolen time returned to the universe. You awoke back on the command deck of the Dauntless. The war was over. Humanity had survived. Time was reborn. It was stable. It was whole. You had won. You had saved everyone. You had made the impossible choice and protected your flawed, beautiful reality. But things were not the same. You were not the same. You and the other anchors, the other survivors of the temporal war, had been changed. You could still feel the currents of time. You could see the faint lines of causality that held the universe together. You were no longer just human. You were the guardians of the new dawn. Your war was over. But your watch had just begun. Humanity had not just survived the storm. It had learned the shape of the rain. You and the others like you stood as silent protectors, patrolling the shores of forever, ensuring that no one would ever break time again. Humanity had not just endured. It had mastered eternity. And you were its eternal, vigilant shepherd.